welcome to the Total Country Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the second show of the Total Country Podcast. My name's Kevin Angel, and thanks for joining me. If it's your first time listening, hello, and thanks for pressing play. If you go back to episode 1, you can hear a great interview with the super talented Kezia Gill. If you heard show 1, I'm glad you like what you've heard and have returned. Right, that's the niceties out of the way. Joining me on today's show is Bristol-based singer-songwriter Danny McMahon. Having spent many years producing and writing pop songs, Danny took the plunge into writing country in 2017 after going to the Country to Country Music Festival in London, England, and falling in love with the music. Danny discusses it in the interview, but he instantly fell in love with the scene when he found a truth and honesty in country that he felt was missing from commercial pop music. Danny began writing, and his first EP, Making Memories, came out in November 2017, followed by the release of Momentarily in 2018. In 2019, he released what for me is his strongest EP to date, the candidly honest Boys Cry 2, a release that features a track of the same name and the super emotional When I See You. These two tracks in particular really are wear your heart on your sleeve stuff and have helped Danny cement a strong bond with his fans. Towards the end of the year, he released Lonely, a song saturated in the Nashville sound, but lyrically still in keeping with the frankness you'd expect from him. BCMA awards, as you'd expect, have come Danny's way, as well as nominations for international awards. Danny's successes have allowed him to travel the world, performing in slots at festivals in Italy, Sweden, and shows in St. Louis, Missouri, and of course, Nashville, Tennessee. He's a regular across UK country festivals and had some great slots at this year's C2C before it was sadly cancelled due to the coronavirus. Danny's got a single coming out in a month or so time and some huge plans for his country music career. Whilst growing his own career, he continues to write for other artists as well as producing records for others within the scene. That should give you enough of an insight to Danny now, so without further ado, here's my sit down with Danny McMahon. Enjoy. So I'm on the line with Danny McMahon. Danny, how are you doing, mate? You all right?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm all right. So I asked this to Kezia Gill when I spoke to her last week, and I'm sure I'm going to ask it forever for the moment. So every show is going to start the same, I'm sure. But we're all stuck in this weird quarantine situation, wherever you're listening in the world, pretty much the same. But how's it treating you, Danny? How is it sort of influenced you in terms of creativity? Are you finding it a positive? Is it a negative? Where do you stand on things at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of like 6 of one, half dozen of the other, if I'm completely honest, because, I mean, there's a couple of ways you can look at it, really. I mean, it's definitely, the best thing that you can do is make your music as accessible as possible in these situations. Obviously, we can't play shows, which is a tough one in the sense that obviously there isn't really a record industry anymore. People don't buy records, so we can't make our money as artists that way. It's all through playing live shows, essentially. Yeah. It's kind of how we sustain ourselves in this day and age. So obviously we can't do that anymore. But obviously in terms of making ourselves as accessible to as many people as possible, this whole sort of, looking at the live stream option and doing a lot of that sort of digital based stuff is great, because then you turn around and at the end of a session you've had 1,500 people view your stream, and it's not that often that independent artists gets to play a gig to that many people. So it's kind of that sort of catch-22 idea, really, I guess. For me, it's an interesting one for sure. I mean, as far as songwriting is concerned as well, I've been, I think a lot of guys have found a way to be sort of as engaging as possible with that, in terms of writing with other artists. Obviously, in the country scene, writing with other people is a massive thing. The whole co-write thing. So I've written with guys from Nashville that I haven't spoken to for a little while. Things like that, things that you otherwise wouldn't have as much time to do, which is cool, and sort of just trying to find the benefits in it that way, I guess.
Perfect. You've been really quite active on the live stream thing on Facebook and Instagram at the moment, haven't you?
Yeah, man. I mean, as I always say this with I work with other people as well on that kind of stuff, in terms of like the whole artist development side of life. And I think it's just really important with you kind of got to strike that balance between not oversaturating it and sort of making sure that people don't forget who you are, because I think in this particular period of time, people are going to be doing the social media thing so much. If you don't consistently make yourself sort of present and visible, I think people are going to forget about you pretty quickly. So it's sort of just trying to make sure that you're sort of, you're there, and obviously, responding to your fans' wants and needs as well at the same time, which is cool, because it is that sort of, you can have that direct and engaging conversation with them pretty quickly on those platforms, which is cool.
Of course. Have you found an uptake on new fans pretty quickly? Like, have you seen a correlation on maybe your social media going up as a result of doing shows?
100%, because obviously, anyone can watch you from anywhere in the world at that given time. So obviously, when you're doing a show in a bar in Scunthorpe, people can't do that so much. You know what I mean? So
what a place to pick.
I know, of all the places to pick. But yeah, it was kind of that. It's that kind of concept, really. And obviously, people have got nothing to do, so they're on the computers all the time as well. So it's kind of like providing that content, and at the same time, people are looking for it. So I think there's kind of, to add to that, there's kind of this conversation. I see a lot of artists are asking at the moment whether, is it now a good time to be doing stuff and putting new music out? I think absolutely yes is the answer, because people are hungry for something fresh, something new, something to do, something to explore.
Yeah.
Nothing else to do. So that, yeah, definitely, I think that's sort of like the benefit, that as far as that's concerned.
Are you finding much inspiration at the moment in terms of how you write, or is it a negative, or are you having to get more involved in the co-writes to, sort of inspire, or what? Talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I wouldn't say I'm particularly uninspired by what's going on. I mean, it does make it a lot harder to sort of, engage in a sort of autobiographical, I mean, a lot of people like to sort of what people watch to sort of get their inspiration for their songwriting. I'm not one of those people. I tend to sort of draw from my own autobiographical experiences more. And that's sort of like, I was writing with Elliot Joseph the other day, and we kind of were sort of thinking about, okay, well, what kind of concept can we write about at the moment when there's not as much happening? It's like, well, let's have a look at maybe something that's going to happen in the future, and how are we going to feel off the back of this, and how it's going to. I think that's going to be a really big one. I think there's going to be a lot of songs, people experience. I think we're going to sort of look at the world in a very different way. I think people are going to appreciate things that they haven't appreciated before. So it's kind of that's sort of like the approach that I've been taking with a lot of my songwriting, is trying to I always do this. I was trying to turn a negative into a positive, even if it's something, that I've been through that's not been particularly great. Like, I guess Boys Cry 2 is an example of that. It was that sort of just taking a negative situation and turning it into something positive. So I wouldn't say I feel particularly uninspired. I think it's sort of just taking what I've got and running with it, really.
So for someone listening to this hasn't heard you before, or has maybe only heard your name and doesn't really know your music yet, how would you describe your sound?
Stylistically, I always just go with country pop. I take elements of that I love of country music that goes all the way back, all the way through to as I say, like some modern pop acts. I've got a massive thing for sort of like 80s synth music as well, trying to blend that in. But like, in a nutshell, it's like country pop. I say sort of songs about real life experiences. There's no bells and whistles as far as all the lyrics are concerned. It's just literally about experiences that I've been through that I hope people can relate to. As long as it's relatable, I'm happy, basically.
Where did your love for country come from?
My first taste of proper American country music actually came from Brad Paisley. I was working as a session guitarist for a while. Up at Paramount Music before I started getting into the songwriting stuff. One of my friends just said to me, he was like, look, check out this guitar player. He's really, really cool. So I checked out Brad Paisley's stuff, and I sort of started to explore with that. And I think I discovered Letter to Me. And I fell in love with the whole idea of it, because I was doing a lot of pop writing at the time, and I was actually getting really sort of like run down and sick of it, because it was I felt like it was very regurgitated, it was very formulaic, it was, and that can apply to any genre of music for sure, but at that particular time, I was writing commercially, I was writing to a brief, and I sort of lost my soul a little bit.
Yeah.
And I've listened to Letter to Me, and I just listened to the lyrical concept and the way that he sung it, and I was like, that's real. That's soul. That's got soul. That's got meaning. That's got purpose. That's got authenticity. That's what music should be. It was almost like a slap in the face. when I heard that song, I was that's kind of what I think I should be doing. So I started to write more country music for other people. I still didn't do the artist thing for a good period of time. After that, I was still sort of doing my synth pop project that I was doing at the time. Nice. And then I was writing for other people, but the more I was writing with other artists, the more I fell in love with it. And I was working in a sports shop, like part-time, at this particular time. My boss, the first day I met him, he came in and I was like, oh, so what kind of music do you listen to? And he says, I listen. You probably don't like what I listen to. I said, no, go on. I listen to a lot of different stuff. He's like, I really like country music. I was like, oh, no way. He said, me too. I mean, and so we kind of sort of like had a discussion about it. He kept showing me all this new stuff that I hadn't heard before. All the stuff that was like fresh out of Nashville at the time, or like the Dan and Shays and the Sam Hunts of this world. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's it, mate. That's the music that I want to make. That right there. I think I went to C2C 2017, and I saw Chase Bryant play on a Saturday morning, 11:30, to a room that was about a third full. Yeah. And I watched him play and went, right, that's it. I want to do that. So, yeah, basically went home from C2C 2017 and wrote an EP's worth of songs.
Good. Okay, perfect. 3 chords on the truth. Classic. Do you have a standard songwriting process, or are you one of those people that sit down and think I need to write, or is it something that comes into your head?
To be honest, it's kind of like, for me, I'll either go, I'll find a situation and I'll kind of go, I need to write about that, or it'll make me feel something, and a particular sort of like series of words will start to arise. Yeah. That's one that I really sort of click with. A lot of the time, for me, my thing, obviously coming from a more pop background, is the thing that I'm, as a songwriter, I would say I'm better at is melody. Melody is like my first thing. So a lot of the time, if I find a really good melody, if I'm walking down the street and I kind of hear it with the chord progression, without my instrument a lot of the time, because I mean, you know, I was a guitarist before I was a songwriter, and for me, sometimes I feel like if you sort of hug onto your instrument for dear life, it can restrict you a little bit. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes, I mean, a lot of the time, I would say for me, it's about finding a really good melody in a meaningful context lyrically. Once I've got that, I feel like I'm onto something. That tends to be my process, but it always has to, for me. And whether it's lighthearted, whether it's really, really serious, it has to mean something. Because at the end of the day, like, you've only got a song if it's emotionally relatable to people. Yeah, of course. Because you can't play for yourself your whole life. Do you know what I mean? Like, it has to. We only have a job because people are somehow able to engage with it. And that's usually for me on an emotional level. You know, for me, that's why I write songs, is being able to sort of like share those emotions with other people, because I'm actually pretty rubbish at doing it with words. That's my best way of sort of like communicating with people and sort of sharing emotions with other people is through song. Some of your songwriting, or maybe all of it really, is really quite personal. So if we take a song like, you mentioned it earlier again, Boys Cry 2 or When I See You, those are really quite honest, sort of, you know, lay your shit out on the floor songs. Yeah. Is songwriting quite cathartic for you? Is this the way that you get everything that's going on out of your head and to just sort of deal with it, or? 100%. It is songwriting for me since the age of when I wrote a song. So yeah, sort of 15, 16, it's always been a sort of, you know, a mental therapy, really. That's always been the case. I mean, Boys Cry 2 was taking that to a whole nother level, because it was not only talking about mental health, which is tough at the best of times, but doing it from a male perspective. So it's rare. It was sort of, it could have gone one or two ways. You know, luckily I was absolutely blown away, and I had a lot of messages from, you know, guys who had listened to that song and been like, you know, thank you for putting that message out there, because that's how I feel all the time. And that's cool. That's kind of what I wanted to do with it, but it had to be done well. It could have, you know, I revised those lyrics again and again and again to make sure that it was, I was saying it in the right way. I think a lot of the time with those things, you got to be sensible about it, and just as I say, it's that relatability factor again, you know. But that's what I tried to make sure that I